Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. You are listening to Current Cinematic Conundrums. I'm your host Flo and this is episode number 3. In this show we will discuss the recent cinema blockbusters It and Blade Runner 2049. Afterwards I will quickly round up the discussion of NIFFF 2017 with the 2 remaining movies, which are both Takashi Miike films and go by the names Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable Chapter 1, rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? And Mogura no Uta Hong Kong Kyozo Kyoku, or the Mole Song Hong Kong Capriccio. All that and more right after some music, going with our Japanese theme for NIFFF. This is Hunting for Your Dream by Galnerius. Welcome back, dear listeners, to CCC, the podcast with such sights to show you. It is a grand time of year for horror movie fans, as it is once again October, and Halloween is just around the corner. As you have probably realised by now, I do like a horror flick now and then myself. Now I find myself in a position where I really want to do the 31 Days of Halloween challenge. And make no mistake, even for people that adore horror cinema like I do, it is certainly a challenge. For those of you who are not aware of this, 31 Days of Halloween means watching 31 horror movies which you have never seen before in the run-up to Halloween. One for every day in October. While I certainly would love to do that, I find it hard to put together a list of 31 horror films which I not only could potentially enjoy, but also have not seen yet. So I would certainly appreciate a little input from you guys regarding my list. If you know any cool and obscure horror films which I might not have seen yet, please do not hesitate to contact me. But enough of that, let's talk movies right after this trailer.
In a world where terrible mainstream rules the realm of cinema, 2 movie buffs embark on an epic journey to restore the balance. In a monumental quest to unite art and trash and bring glory to the underbelly of cinema. These critics fear nobody, not even Michael Bay. Featuring the English language Current Cinematic Conundrums and the German Art or Trash Cinema podcast, bringing you movies such as Audition, Cemetery Man, Nosferatu, and Blackula. Host Flo and co-host Jan will take you on a twisted trip through cinematic history and welcome you to the Art or Trash Cinema podcast.
The Art or Trash Cinema podcast is available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all major podcast apps for free. Warning, this program is not safe for work and contains explicit language.
There you go. She's all ready, Captain.
Thanks, Billy. It's not like any town I've ever been in before. People die or disappear 6 times the national average. And that's just grown-ups. Kids are worse. way, way worse.
We all float down here.
I saw something. There was this
Clown. Yeah, I saw him too.
look. It's all connected by the sewers. That's where it lives. What happened? Bill?
Bill, if you'll come with me, you'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too.
A short thing I would like to address at this point is a little something we like to call hype. Now I'm going to get a bit more serious at this point, please bear with me as this is a subject close to my heart. I would like to talk about this in the context of the 2017 film It. I'm sure you're all familiar with it in one way or another. I'm sure you have all heard it is a masterpiece and it's breaking all these box office records and so on. It is a remake of the 1990 TV production of the same name. Both the cinematic version and the TV miniseries are adaptations of a Stephen King book. While I would not call myself a Stephen King fan, I have to say that I certainly do not dislike his stories. Just to clarify ahead of my review really. Firstly, I would like to say that I enjoyed the film. It was perfectly fine. It had great cinematography and it had some genuinely unsettling moments. However, everything else just felt really mediocre. Please send your angry letters to whatever. No, I'm kidding. I felt that at its core, the movie lacked in focus. Focus in terms of characters, meaning there were too many characters and too little development. Focus in terms of driving the story onwards to a satisfying conclusion, meaning that there was a lot of boo effects which were nice and all, but by the end of the movie these just started to get me really bored. And focus also in terms of tone. The tone of the movie was just all over the place. It wants to be timeless, however, also feels like it's set in the 80s. It wants to be scary, but it also wants to be a whimsical coming-of-age character piece. Having so many different approaches or wanting to pack so much into one movie, it just doesn't work. Even if you have 2 hours plus of running time, just makes it even worse, in my view. Compared to the original, it is a superior film from a technical perspective. There's no doubt about that. However, in terms of tone, the TV version just has much more character, even though that actually wasn't scary at all. But probably what annoyed me most was the CGI. While a lot of the effects are done really well and look great, there are so many moments of just painfully obvious CGI bullshit, which just takes you out of the movie really. If the director, Andres Muschietti, had chosen to use these effects more sparingly and instead went for a practical effect now and then, it could have improved this movie significantly. Making a specific example would be the running effect of Bill Skarsgård as the scary clown or It. It just looked laughably stupid to me and completely took me out of the atmosphere of the movie. Another issue to me was the story. I know it's a two-parter and I know that it's supposedly fairly true to the source material, but for me it just went nowhere. In addition, the love story is just developed so awkwardly. While the stereotypically fat kid kisses the girl to wake her from her slumber, which is such a cliche in the first place, the stuttering kid kisses her at the end of the movie as well. It just feels like they desperately tried to end on a high note. I'm aware that in the original, the source material, all of the boys sleep with the girl in the end, whereby I highly doubt that it will actually be in the second movie. However, similar to the main story, this love interest subplot just is there and does absolutely nothing for me. It even bored me at times because it was so riddled with cliches, really. I have to give props to the mostly no-name cast though. Apart from Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things, the acting was for the most part really good. Again, however, Bill Skarsgård's performance was painfully overhyped. I expected so much from him, and really, I just thought it was alright. I didn't feel like he was much creepier than Tim Curry in the original, who at least was actually funny as well. Now, to be fair, overall, you certainly cannot say it is a bad movie, but it was certainly not the masterpiece people made it out to be. I mean, I heard of people saying that this is the best movie of the year so far. Just shut up, please. This is something that majorly annoys me. People jumping on the hype train without even being a tiny bit critical. It is important to point out good things and bad things in film, like really with everything in life. As a result, we will be able to improve on bad things and keep the good things going. However, blindly running after all the other sheep will help nobody. So yeah, this has become something painfully apparent to me in cinema. Me personally, I'm actually at a point where I sometimes won't go to see a film that gets this much buzz, just because I know that it will never live up to it. The press will hype the shit out of movies which aren't even out yet, and then the hype train of casual moviegoers will start rolling. So let's make things clear at this point. It was perfectly fine, it wasn't good, it wasn't bad, it was just that, fine. Other films this applies to are, and I'm perfectly aware this will piss people off here, Deadpool or even Star Wars Rogue One. Both of these. Terrible story, terrible character development, lousy acting, and a little bit of nice action. This doesn't constitute the greatest Star Wars movie or the most daring superhero movie in years, as they were hyped up to be. There is nothing daring or new about either of these movies, and also, just let Star Wars die in peace already, guys. Okay, rant over, I'm digressing. What I want to say is, guys, and I'm sure this does not apply to any of our listeners, but next time people sell you a movie way in advance for being brilliant and then continue to say it's amazing after finally having seen it, even though in truth you actually know that it wasn't all that good, be critical. It's important we stay critical in a world, and this is not only relating to cinema, but in general, staying critical in a world which increasingly and blindly throws itself into beliefs and mass hysteria without understanding and questioning things at all is essential. Don't be sheep, guys. So, to sum up, it gets a 4.5 out of 10 from me. No recommendation, no stamp of approval. It is painfully mediocre, which is made even worse by the fact that people overhyped it as much as they did, even way in advance. For fans of Stephen King and the original TV miniseries, give it a watch, but don't go out of your way to see it. Alright, that's it for it. Let us move on to Blade Runner 2049 right after this.
Every civilization was built off the back of a disposable workforce. But I can only make so many. Happy birthday.
There is an order to things. That's what we do here. We keep order. The world is built on a wall that separates kind. Tell either side there's no wall, you bought a war.
You're a cop. I did your job once. I was good at it.
I know.
What do you want?
I want to ask you some questions.
The key to the future is finally unearthed. Bring it to me. They know you're here.
always told you, you're special. Your story isn't over yet. There's still a page left.
Blade Runner 2049. Now, the first question I asked myself when I first heard about this movie was, why? Does this movie need to exist? 35 years after the 1982 Ridley Scott classic, Denis Villeneuve brings us this sequel. For those who are not aware of the original Blade Runner, head over to the Auto Trash Cinema podcast and check out episode number 8, which features an in-depth discussion of this undoubtedly brilliant and absolutely timeless movie. Now, did we need this movie? Hell no, hell no. But ignoring this question and the obvious answer to it, let us actually look at how it is. So people who listen to our main show might actually remember that I was very clear in my expectation regarding this movie. I believe my exact words were, it's going to be shit. Something like that. Something like that. Now, you guys have no idea how I hate to be wrong. I was really taken aback by this film. And I hate to admit that I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty decent sequel. Let's get into a bit more details and thus some basic spoilers. Blade Runner 2049 opens up with the same type of exposition text as the original does, telling us that there are new and supposedly safe versions of replicants, which hunt down the remaining old models. These are the same Nexus 8 models which were originally made by the Tyrell Corporation, which by now has gone into bankruptcy. However, there is a new mega corporation basically identical to Tyrell called Wallace Corporation. They are also the ones which manufacture the new replicant models. Enter K, played by Ryan Gosling, a replicant Blade Runner who hunts down one of the remaining Nexus 8 replicants for the LAPD. After barely managing to kill the guy, who is played by Dave Bautista by the way, he discovers a grave underneath a tree. Upon further inspection in the lab, they discover bones which belonged to a female replicant who died during childbirth. Obviously, replicants are not designed to reproduce, which sends the LAPD into high alert mode, trying to contain this news and to get to the bottom of this issue. K is thus ordered to destroy all evidence to the case and retire the replicant child. Now, first of all, talking about the most impressive feat of this movie. The visuals. Denis Villeneuve, whom we know from the fantastic Sicario for example, presents us with gorgeous cinematography. This movie looks brilliant. This is an example where CGI was used properly. It looks stunning and fits the atmosphere of the film. I was absolutely drawn in by the sets and the architecture we get to see here. Comparing it to the original, however, I still prefer the visuals of the original film. The reason being that the original had much more details going on in the back or foreground, while you can rewatch the 80s version of Blade Runner a million times and can still discover new things. I doubt that this will be the case with this movie. It's not as jam-packed with little lore bits and little details of this cyberpunk world. In fact, the new movie is much more clean overall in terms of cinematography, if that makes sense. Also, considering the fact that the original did not have the technical opportunities Villeneuve was able to use today, it was obviously a much bigger achievement overall, talking about visuals and also special effects. Nonetheless, Blade Runner 2049 has a beautiful but bleak art style which I really did enjoy. Talking about the story, I have to give props to the writers Hampton Fancher and Michael Green. The style of storytelling is almost identical to the original Ridley Scott film. While the basic story itself, Kay hunting for the replicant child, is kept very simple and minimalistic, the world around our protagonists and the story it tells is given a lot more attention. This is exactly what the old Blade Runner did as well. However, I do have some things that did not work for me. Careful, spoilers incoming. Now, once Kay discovers that it is Deckard and Rachel's child he is looking for, I have to say that the story felt like a bit of a stretch to me. It just felt like it was trying too hard to connect it to the first movie, which sort of ruined the story arc for me. I would have been perfectly fine without any connection at all. From that point on, I mostly looked at the gorgeous visuals and stopped caring about the story in general, to be honest. Nevertheless, I did like the scene where Kay realizes that it is not him who is the child of Deckard, as he had previously assumed. That actually was sort of heartbreaking, asking the question, am I something special? And then having this wish denied immediately. And with that, we are also at a point of philosophical subtext, which is still very much present in this movie. The movie points out similar questions as the original did. Can artificial things have souls? And at what point do we accredit something with having a soul? And also, does a product of two artificial things acquire a soul by the mere fact that it's conceived naturally? Is that more human than men are? Blade Runner 2049 does the same with its questions as the original does. It asks them, but never provides any semblance of an answer. Which, if you have listened to our Blade Runner review on the AOTCP, is something I perceive as a little bit of a flaw in the first movie as well. So overall, while the story works brilliantly in the way that it's told, its arc somehow lost me at the ending. Introducing a rebellion in the last 15 minutes and so on, it felt empty and it lost its gravitas. However, the existential nature of this movie's plot is something that works fairly well, similar to the 80s film. Now finally, let's talk about the performances in this. I have to admit, and I will probably say it a million times again and again, Ryan Gosling is just a terrible actor. He is awful. He has no charisma, he has no screen presence other than looking pretty, and his face is just so plain that it bores me out of my mind looking at him. But, and here is the big but, he did not do a bad job in this. He is this mechanical, rational being which follows the white rabbit down the hole into Wonderland, which it really works. Yes, his performance was deadpan, but he is a replicant, which somewhat makes sense. Even though I have to say these robots are extremely advanced and are supposed to be extremely human-like, wouldn't that mean that they somehow show human emotions as well? Because we clearly see other replicants showing emotions. For example, the new model in Wallace Corporation, she clearly is afraid. They even say so in the dialogue. So why is Gosling as blank-faced as he is in every other movie? We don't know. Maybe he was bored. We don't know. No, but to be fair, I enjoyed his acting in some of the moments which have more gravitas. As I mentioned before, the scene where he realizes that he's not the child of Deckard and Rachel, it's great. But then again, the love story between him and the computer program Joy, which is played by Ana de Armas, feels so one-sided. She gives a hell of a performance in this, and God is she cute. But Gosling does not really seem to be fazed by this very much. I think this relationship only worked on screen because she put so much into this. And spoiler alert, even when she dies in this film, it just happens. It doesn't have that much weight to it because Ryan Gosling just doesn't make anything out of this scene. He doesn't seem to care all that much. Anyways, moving on to Harrison Ford. I love him. I love him in almost everything he's in, except maybe the Star Wars Christmas special. While he doesn't have much dialogue in this, he just has a screen presence which nobody else has in this entire movie. Great performance. Jared Leto, he does a good job too. He's fairly sleazy, but I'm sorry, he is no Rutger Hauer. A proper bad guy could potentially have been an improvement here, even if it's in the grey area whether he's bad or not. Oh, and finally, Edward James Olmos is in this also. I just love that. Something I haven't mentioned yet is the music and sound design, which is wonderful. I'm not a Hans Zimmer fan, but this score, in its visceral mechanical moodiness and the sounds emanating from all the machinery, spaceships and so on in the background, it just makes for a great atmosphere. This I absolutely loved. Alright, so let me sum this up quickly. I thought this was a fairly worthy sequel to the original Blade Runner. I had a good time with this, however I'm still of the opinion that we did not need this movie, even though it positively surprised me. Stop making sequels, be original. I know Villeneuve is capable of that, so next time please make something new. Oh, and don't you fucking dare making a Blade Runner 3. Anyways, I love the atmosphere, the sound design, and especially the visuals in this movie. While the cinematography is brilliant, it is still not as good as the original, lacking a lot of the attention to detail and charm which the 80s movie put into the world building aspect. The story works very, very well in the way it is told, even though it loses a lot of its creativeness and flow in the last 40 minutes of the film, which also shows that the movie is a bit too long. I mostly dug the acting of the protagonist with the exception of Ryan Gosling, who I think was just okay in this. I'm sure a lot of the deadpan attitude was a directing choice, so he's not entirely to blame, even though I know he's a bit deadpan by nature. He's just not a good actor. However, admittedly, he did have a few great moments in this too. Now, overall, I certainly do recommend this movie. While completely unnecessary, it is a decent take on the Blade Runner formula. However, I will not give it a stamp of approval because I'm just so sick of Hollywood sequels and remakes. Nevertheless, this movie has gorgeous cinematography, and just for that reason, it's worth seeing it in cinemas. The existential questions it brings forth are compelling and make this a good cinematic experience. One thing is clear though, it is nowhere near as good as the original. For me,
7 out of 10 origami bulls.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us finish our NIFFF 17 experience. Finally, we're looking at the penultimate movie I've seen there, Jojo's Bizarre Adventure Diamond is Unbreakable Chapter 1.
Jojo 先輩、一緒帰ろうよ、ジョジョ先輩。今日の髪型も決まってるし。ジョジョ先輩最高。
なんだよその変な頭は。おい、今俺の頭のことなんつった。
彼の名は東方丈介。人は彼をジョジョと呼ぶ。彼は形ある超能力スタンドを操る高校生。その能力は破壊されたものを直すことができる。彼の住む森王町で次々と起こる奇妙な事件。
東方丈介、この町に危険が迫っていることの証拠だ。
事件の裏に潜む凶悪なスタンド使いたち。今大切なものを守るため。
しげちゃん大丈夫、傷は完璧に。
いくつもの運命が動き出す。
絶対に許さねえ。悪いのはお前だ。おめでとう、お前は選ばれた。逃げてんじゃねえよ。俺がこの町を守りますよ。運命に逆らうつもりはない。兄貴、やめろー。グレートだぜ。
Jojo's Bizarre Adventure is a live-action adaptation of the manga by Hirohiko Araki. Not having read any of the mangas and not having seen any of the animes, I went into this completely blind, admittedly mostly for the reason that Takashi Miike was at the screening that I went to, which also happened to be the world premiere of this film. We talk about Miike all the time on this podcast channel, but if you're still not familiar with this guy, check out the Auto Trash Cinema Podcast episode 2, where me and my co-host Jan have a look at Audition, which is arguably Miike's best film. Josuke Higashikata, played by Kento Yamasaki, aka Jojo, really likes his hair. He likes his hair so much that he starts a fight with anybody who says anything negative about it. Basically, he's the Japanese version of Marty McFly, who gets pissed off if you call him a chicken. Jojo is also a stand user, which is basically magic, which summons a fighter with certain specific abilities. Jojo's grandfather Ryohei is the chief of police in the sleepy coastal hamlet of Murio. Ryohei is played by one of my absolutely favorite Japanese actors, Jun Kunimura, whom you may know from Sion Sono's Why Don't You Play in Hell, Na Hong-chin's prolific The Wailing, and many other seminal Asian horror movies. Oh, he's also in Audition, by the way. After the mad murderer Anjuro Katagiri escapes from the long arm of Ryohei's law, he's shot in the throat with a mystical arrow by the tall-haired Keicho Nijimura, played by Masaki Okada, and gains the ability to be a stand user who manipulates all forms of water. He's given a great power and he wants revenge on Ryohei. Obviously, Jojo, being a stand user himself, will not stand for this. Sorry about that. If this sounds confusing to you, that's because it actually is a little bit. If you're not familiar with the story of the manga, you might get lost here and there in the course of this movie. However, this does certainly not make this experience any less fun. The humor is wacky, the action looks amazing, as do the set pieces. Even though this is clearly Miike's mainstream phase, you can definitely tell here and there that Miike put his own dark touches into this. I mentioned the scene where the serial killer guy gets shot by an arrow. This scene is done extremely well, bordering on uncomfortable, but with gorgeous cinematography as it is set in the rain and in the middle of night. It's beautiful. Thus, not only is this movie praised to be a very accurate representation of its source material, it also manages to keep its own style, which certainly can be accredited to Miike's directing. But Jojo does not come without its flaws. I'm sure that if you are a die-hard fan of the manga, you will get a kick out of every turn the plot takes in the second half of the movie. However, for somebody who has never read any of the books, the movie gets fairly slow and takes a long time to get to its conclusion. Even though it is highly enjoyable for what it is, it might have worked better with about half an hour less in terms of its running time. Nevertheless, overall, I would recommend this movie as it is very weird, has a great sense of humor, and even has little bits of brilliance here and there. Stamp of approval. I give this movie 6 out of 10 hairdos, not so much an unbreakable diamond, more like a diamond in the rough. And with that, let us move on to the final movie presented at NIFFF 17, which I had the pleasure to attend, the Mole Song Hong Kong Capriccio, right after this.
巡査だったキッカーレイジ潜入捜査官に任命するは日本一凶悪な犯罪組織すき家会に潜入し4代目会長轟秀法を挙げる俺だぜ兄弟俺とちぎりを交わしてくれ相棒の証に引き金を引けここに繋がんのかよ潜入捜査官なんだろうね野郎
私のセクシー写メールしかとして
ヤクザってのはよ面白くなくちゃいけねえんだ裏切りには死をもって償ってもらうお前一人にええかとさせへんでぶち殺したるに根性決めれば怖くないお前殺の犬かお前じゃなきゃダメだから薬を世の中にばらまいてる奴らを一網打尽にするなんで生まれたんなんで俺だって黙ってんだよ兄弟死なないでレイジ君僕らの歌
The Mole Song Hong Kong Capriccio is the second movie of the Mogura no Uta, or the Mole Song Saga. Amusingly, I was neither aware of the fact that this was the second movie of this franchise, nor that it was based on a manga when I first went into this. At this point, however, I have become a bit of a fan of these movies. This is Miike at his craziest, even though it is an entirely different sort of madness when compared to Ichi the Killer or Audition. The Mogura films are bright, loud, and not very subtle. Nonetheless, these movies are a shitload of fun. There is so much enjoyment to be had with these films, provided that the viewer is in the right mindset. Now, first of all, as I mentioned before, these movies are based on the manga series Mogura no Uta by Noboru Takahashi, which up to January 2016 has sold 6.5 million print copies. Obviously this screams for a real-life adaptation for cinema. Enter Takashi Miike. Both the first movie, The Mole Song, Undercover Agent Reiji, and the second movie, Hong Kong Capriccio, have one thing in common. They feel like a manga has been banned on film, and I mean this in a literal sense. The cinematography, the acting, the set pieces, and the over-the-top humor feel exactly like a manga, and it is glorious. But I'm going to warn you, this movie not only features the seriously horny protagonist Reiji, who is absolutely batshit insane, but also a gangster mentor Papillon, who is even more insane and claims that Yakuza need to be funny in order to be good. I'm not going to try to explain the story here because, as you probably noticed already, it does not make a lot of sense when saying it out loud. It has to be experienced firsthand for the amazing madness that it is. Therefore, I kind of see these movies as one large and utterly insane piece of Japan, just too glorious not to love. If you do not have an aversion regarding the typically manga anime style of comedy and weird Japanese cinema in general, I say go for it. Now sadly I only saw the second one in theatres at NIFFF, in addition to having seen the first one a week later or so, but these movies still caught me off guard and I consider myself a little bit of a fan, as I said before. Stamp of recommendation for Japan fans. Trying to rate this movie is a whole other question again. It's really hard to speak of a good or great movie when referring to these. However, as they are unbelievably entertaining, even though most of it is just silly as hell, these movies work. Miike wants to blast you with a ridiculous story and imagery, and he completely succeeds with it. And that for me makes a functioning movie. I mean, they set out to do something crazy, and they achieved what they wanted to achieve. These movies are what they want to be. Therefore, for both of these as one large, crazy movie, 6.5 out of 10, a must watch for fans of Japanese comics or cartoons. I really have a weak spot for these movies. And there we go. With this, I officially discussed all the movies I've seen at NIFFF in our podcasts. Looking back, this was a really, really great festival. The percentage of good or even great movies which I've seen there is just laughably high. Obviously this speaks for the choice of movies of the people in charge there. As a result, we will certainly be back next summer to do some more podcasting. And with that, we're already at the end of this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you haven't checked out our main show, the Auto Trash Cinema Podcast, please go and do so. Keep in mind that it is in German though. For feedback and inputs, please contact artortrashcinemapodcast@gmail.com. I am happy to receive death threats, angry letters, complaints, whatever. Movie recommendations are fine as well. Thank you all, and remember, I have such sights to show you.
所詮ちっぽけなものさだからくよくよしない